Hello, I'm Jeff Mayhew, your host of The Sphere of Power. The representation station? I don't know. Walter and I are going to debate that later in the show. But up next, we have Andy Tippett, the conservative historian, on tap for you. We dive deep into history with Andy, discussing the original intent of the House, why it was capped, and the modern effects of a lack of representation. So without further ado, here we go. We're live again on X. It's the No Cap Fund representation station, Sphere of Power. I don't know. Walter's got something to say about that later. Welcome in. We appreciate you joining us tonight. So I am Jeff Mayhew. I'm the vice president of No Cap Fund. Above me or beside me or somewhere around me is Walter Clapp, our president. Walter, why don't you introduce yourself to the crowd tonight?
Hey, everyone. My name is Walter Clapp. I am an attorney and increasingly a specialist in the area of defining representation and how you can be represented better by professionals and by those who are elected by you. So I look forward to getting to know you. Please reach out, engage with us, donate if you're looking to sponsor the podcast or the live stream. If you want naming rights, those things are all available. So please hit up the DMs.
Walter has gone straight from president to salesman right off the bat. Roger is with us tonight. Roger is our treasurer. Roger, why don't you give the people a little something about yourself?
In my experience, there's not much difference between the president and the salesman. Company, country, call it what you like. I'm Roger Scott. I'm a CPA out of North Carolina. I'm carefully tracking the rate of theft of our representation by Congresses over the past century and becoming more and more enraged with each passing day.
I am Jeff Mayhew. I'm a dad of 5 who decided that something was wrong, and self-government means taking responsibility for yourself. My dad always used to tell me, Jeff, don't step over a mess, pick it up. That is what I'm doing here. And tonight we are joined by Andy Tippett. Andy is a podcaster. He's a former marketing executive who decided to get into his passion, probably for the same reason we all did. He hosts the Conservative Historian podcast, and he's written for different types of outlets and Substacks as well on history. Andy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you very much for having me on the No Cap Fund, Jeff. Really, really thrilled to be here.
It's called the Sphere of Power.
It's called the representation station.
We're going to talk about that later tonight. So, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where do you come from? I think it's interesting, having the background that you do.
Yeah, so for about 30 years, so I graduated with history degrees, and one in education, but eventually found myself in business over 30 years. And after what I'd like to think was a pretty successful business career, I left business to pursue my ultimate passion, my lodestone, which has always been history. But one of the things, though, that I had observed is that history had altered a great deal in those intervening 30 years, especially in the academy, in which one now has a ratio of 12 progressive historians to 1 conservative. So to try to counteract that a little bit, I started the podcast, The Conservative Historian, with my tagline that history is too important to be left to the left. And essentially, my approach is simply this. A lot of history written today, mostly on the left, and now some of it on the right, starts off with a premise, with an idea, and then they cherry pick facts to try to fit that premise or that narrative. But true history, maybe even conservative history, if you will, is the concept of starting out with a historical question, such as one that I hope to answer tonight is, how did the House get to its supine position? But we'll get to that later. So we start off with a question, and then we assemble as many facts as possible to try to answer that question, and only then arrive at an answer. And so that is what I attempt to do on my podcast, Conservative Historian. And we are now up to 267 episodes that cover all eras and all geographies. And just one other sort of mini announcement. I have recently started the Chronicle of American History to focus more specifically on American history and hope to contribute some of that this evening.
That's great. I love your tagline. And as I'm thinking about this, and at first, I think it's great that you pointed out a ratio, because that's something that we're going to talk about tonight and every episode of the ProCap Fund. Is sometimes it's not about whether you get your way or whether your people are in charge. It's about balance, right? And so you pointed out there's an imbalance between pundits or commentators on the left versus the right. And you rightly also point out that we're now starting to get that unbalanced on both sides, right? You've got it's more like the middle, or reason and radicalism. And sometimes the best way to balance something is to just stand up and walk forward, slowly but surely, and you can balance yourself forward. So it's great that you're doing that. And I would like to talk to you about that. As a historian, I'm sure that you've read about our original founding. The Philadelphia Convention is one of my favorite time periods to read about. I visited with Joey, one of our interns, recently, and I was telling him I was reading Plain Honest Men at the time, a great book about the Philadelphia Convention. And I was like, dude, I could tell you where everybody was sitting. I can like picture that room, you know? And so I was just curious, like, you mentioned the original intent of the House. This happened during the Philadelphia Convention when they wrote the Constitution. What was the purpose?
Yeah, and I'm going to believe me, I could give you chapter and verse over the entire depth and breadth of the Constitution, but just let's focus in on the House for a minute. And let all of us go back to that 8th grade civics class where we learned some basics. We learned that we have a bicameral legislature, a Senate, and a House of Representatives. But it was Madison specifically who was highly concerned with the House. And I find this interesting that when you look at the Federalist Papers, which had 3 authors, Hamilton, who wrote the most, Madison the second, and then John Jay, just 5 of them. So Madison was the middle writer, yet he focused specifically one of his 58, Federalist 58, on the House. And so a couple of things that were designed by the House. Number one, every 2 years, this is something, again, we learned in 8th grade civics class, 2 years, the most representative of all the federal offices. Presidents are 4, Senate's 6, Supreme Court justices for life. But one of them every 2 years. So think about it, we just had election last November, but we're going to have one next year. Some of those senators elected in 2024, well they'll be in office till 2030. Trump will be in office till 2028, but these guys have to face the voters. In other words, it was Madison's intent that the House be the most representative body within our federal government. And then he did something very interesting, which he engineered into it, and he defends specifically in Federalist 58. And that is, he gave them the money. Now, all of us have probably heard something called the Golden Rule. Hopefully we've heard it in church. I always note a second golden rule, which is something that I learned not in church, but in business, and that he who has the gold makes the rules. And in that regard, this was Madison's vision, is to give the gold, the purse, the money to the House of Representatives. And I just wanted to just briefly quote on this particular piece, because I think it is so germane to what you're trying to do in a reform of the House. And this is what he said. The House, in a word, holds the purse, that powerful instrument. This power over the purse may in fact be regarded as the most complete and effectual weapon for which any constitution can arm the immediate representatives of the people for obtaining a redress of every grievance. So you can see at that point in Philadelphia where Madison's head was at in regard to the House of Representatives, that he saw this in many regards as the preeminent body. And one last point, there is this thing that arose, I want to say it was maybe during the Nixon years, of the concept of co-equal branches. That wasn't Madison's vision, the original architect of the Constitution. They weren't co-equal. Congress was first. That's why he gave them the purse. And in the Senate side, he gave them the power to declare war. And keep in mind, that they had just thrown out the king of England in this point. We're still surrounded by kings. This was the first continental-sized republic in history. And in this regard, those two key points were put into Congress, but the purse was put into the House. And that's how this began. And that's why reform is so necessary. Well, hopefully we can touch on later both proportion and how we got here.
So there are a couple things there. One, you touched on something I think we're going to talk about a little bit later about the power of the purse, right? And how capping the House and the effects that we're dealing with today. And then, man, I forgot my other point.
Jeff, let me, I got to
Sorry.
jump in if you don't
Go ahead.
mind.
Go ahead.
So first, Andy, I thought that was a great recap, and the language is so evocative. I think the other really evocative point that I think about is that the only time George Washington got up to speak was in defense of fewer constituents per member in the House, right? Oh, with this power of the purse, because I think he agreed that he holds the gold, holds the power. And I also, Jeff, wanted to maybe just take a brief moment to read our Declaration of Representation, kind of on this note.
Yeah, I was supposed to cut to that. That was my bad. So we're gonna just rewind it. Maybe I'll edit this for the podcast and reorder everything. But Walter's gonna read our declaration. Walter, go ahead.
Absolutely. When, in the course of human events, power centralizes and the people struggle to hold their government accountable, we are compelled to reflect. We must ask, what kind of nation do we wish to be? Do we want to be a free and independent people, where out of many we become one? Do we want to be united in purpose, to govern ourselves, sharing authority and responsibility? Or do we want to become another drifting republic, where power escapes the reach of the people and slides towards tyranny or anarchy? We hold these truths to be self-evident: that people were created free, that a republican form of government derives its powers from the consent of the governed, and that consent is given through representation accountable to the people. Since 1929, the people's power in the House of Representatives has remained capped at 435 seats, despite the American population having tripled. This artificial and arbitrary limitation concentrates power, distorts democracy, and undermines the relationship between citizen and representative. The 435-member cap violates the very purpose for which representative government was established: to be accountable to the people. Therefore, we, the people, unite. First, to support reform. We must increase the size of the House of Representatives to remain a free people. Second, to champion honest debate. We welcome rigorous discussion on the methods of expansion. Third, we've got to push for a vote. We demand that Congress hold hearings and openly debate legislation to uncap and modernize the House of Representatives. Fourth, we got a big tent. We pledge to engage Americans of all political stripes in this cause. In support of these commitments, we promise one another our good faith effort, honest voice, and steadfast commitment to peaceably repair representation to the people and balance under our great Constitution. And you can go find that here at www.y435.org, and like John Hancock, you can sign on. And this is not a revolution. We're just adding bricks. We're just adding bricks to an amazing foundation.
And before we lose the thread on the point of Washington, the first veto ever issued in our country was issued by Washington to preserve representation.
Amen.
And let's continue on that, because this is one of my favorite stories. Is, well, not a story, but things that I picked up when I was reading the Chernow biography of Washington. Andy, have you read that one?
Absolutely. Yep.
So it's absolutely fantastic. You notice how frustrated he is with the fact that he can't get his clothes from England? Like, do you like read the letters back and forth, and like how he orders something, he doesn't get what he orders? He realizes that when the people with the power are so far away from you across the ocean, they don't really care. They send it to you. They've already got your money. They don't care. So this is, I think, I honestly believe that this shaped Washington's view of representation. I know it's not written anywhere and he doesn't specifically declare it, but I've got to imagine, besides everything else that he deals with, that this little piece helps shape him and be like, no, we can't have things so far away from us. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and of course the original, what was the fundamental point of the revolution? And one of the great catchphrases, again, we learned this in 8th grade civics course, was the concept of representation that they did not have in Parliament. That no representation and taxation, that they had no voice in.
Yeah, no taxation with representation, which brings us back to the conversation we were having before. And you were talking about the power of the purse. And when we did our pre-interview over the weekend, you said you wanted to talk about the how does it affect, what's a modern news story that compares or connects to the capping of the House? And one of it is you wanted to talk about the reconciliation, the power of the purse. So how do you see those two things connecting?
So here's what's interesting, and this is just sort of a little bit of background to that. There has been a movement over the course of, well, really since the inception of the Republic, but it gained purchase about 100 years ago. There have always been chief executives, Andrew Jackson and Abraham Lincoln probably chief among them. In Lincoln's course of case, he was facing an existential crisis, so his accrual of power was not unnatural. Jackson's, however, was a bit unnatural. And yet, even after these men would leave office, it would almost spring back. It would almost like the power would return to Congress. And one of the things I always find fascinating, too, is that you have throughout history these bills and laws that were named after Congress people. Tariffs are on people's mind right now. Well, in the 1890s, it was the McKinley tariff. That's what they called it. And he was a member of the House. He was, in fact, chief of the Ways and Means Committee. And even recently, whether you like Smoot-Hawley or not, who knows, Graham-Rudman, we can debate that. And definitely Dodd-Frank is debatable, but Barney Frank was a member of Congress. But really, since the advent of Woodrow Wilson, we have had an accrual of power to move from Congress to the executive, to the White House. And more, for whatever reason, the concept of how the purse is controlled has moved and migrated really from Congress to the White House. And just to give you two kind of key examples of that, two massive bills, spending bills essentially, both BBB, I kind of call them two big bloated behemoths, but they were known in the Biden administration as Build Back Better and known in the Trump administration as the Big Beautiful Bill. In both cases, you're talking about significant items that relate to the America's fiscal situation. In one case, it was a massive spending piece. In another case, it was a tax cut, but still there was spending involved in it. And both were architected, managed, and controlled from the White House. And another point, which is even more bizarre that we talked about this weekend, is in the case of Build Back Better, was it managed from the White House? I think we can all kind of make an assumption at this point that from all of the information we now have, that Joe Biden, the executive in the executive branch, wasn't really running things. And yet Congress, even with Build Back Better, was not fundamentally sitting in the driver's seat. So the dream of all the way back to Woodrow Wilson, in which the executive steers the ship of state in all matters, not executing the laws of the United States, not allocating the spend given to him by Congress, but over the last 100 years, now the executive decides how much money is going to be needed, how much money is going to be spent, and how it is going to be allocated. And in that regard, you can see how the purse has fundamentally changed.
At 100%, I focus on the meaning of the word execute, right? Execute does not mean impose your will on everybody. It means execute the plan that's been agreed. And we've gotten so far away from that, as you say, over 100 years.
Yeah, the concept of a legislative body by the very nature means They create the laws, and the executive would then execute upon the laws. And again, the biggest thing I keep getting back to is the allocation of funds, in which here'd be another example. And another example of a bill in which no congressperson, a massive bill, one of the most important in the last 30 years, no congressperson had their name on it, and that was the Affordable Care Act. There were 400 provisos built in a bill that emanated out of Congress to the executive shall decide, which is alarming. Even more alarming, and so let me just take one kind of defense on the no cap fund. One of the concerns, and it's been voiced, I've done a little research on this. You guys have forgotten more about the subject than I will know, but one of the concerns is that too big of a legislative branch means is that a smaller group might control too much. And I'm like, okay, but we have 435 right now. And Nancy Pelosi said these words: "You shall see what's in the bill once you have passed it." In other words, I'm a representative from X state, and I'm voting for a bill on which I literally have no idea what's in it, because my boss, who shouldn't be a boss, it's supposed to be a caucus lead position to organize. I'm the boss I report to shouldn't be the Speaker of the House. It should be my people back in my district. But that's not what happened, and that's not what's happening now. So from ACA to the two triple Bs, we have seen the power of the purse migrate exponentially from the legislative to the executive.
And I think that's why we have such a big debt, right? Because it's got to be really hard to manage such big numbers. And the president is always trying to get reelected. They're always trying to please all the people. And that goes back, we talk about Woodrow Wilson and the effect he had on the executive, but let's face it, Teddy Roosevelt had a big effect on the executive as well. And he saw himself as a representative of the people. And he believed that because you had these large corporate entities that had risen so much, they were kind of oppressive to people, and they did need to be checked. They should be checked through the Congress, right? Because as you mentioned before, Congress is first, and the executive should execute that law. But maybe the Congress wasn't doing their job. Maybe they were corrupted or whatever for different reasons. And Teddy sought to take his argument to the people, and he believed he was a representative of the people, and that concentrated that power. And then he believed you had to fight big with big. So you had to grow the size of the government in order to keep up with the size of the corporations, which is kind of a fair point. It's actually the point I make about checking the executive branch, because all of that power went to the executive in Roosevelt and then further in Woodrow Wilson, and then it's just continued to gain steam, rolling down the hill, right? And it's like the only way you're going to check that power, you're not going to be able to siphon all that power away, because things still need to get done. You're going to have to enlarge Congress. And that's obviously our point here.
And even before Teddy in 1894, two things happened that were just kind of interesting, almost hidden away in the depths of history, because it was a midterm election. In that year, after the Panic of 1893, a group of Democrats called the Bourbon Democrats, which were very small government, and in Cleveland, who was president at the time, was very much of this. He believed in small government. One of his phrases was, "The government exists to serve the people. The people do not exist to serve the government." But his entire congressional group got wiped out in that year. And another thing so small government Democrats were basically kind of eliminated. And you had two different flavors: a populist Democratic Party, eventually progressive, and then a national Republican Party, really, that emerged under McKinley and later his vice president, Teddy Roosevelt. And the other thing that happened in 1894 is a guy named Jacob Coxey decides to organize a march. Now, after the Panic, a lot of his constituencies, his people, were suffering. So he's going to do a march. But he doesn't march on his local government or state capital. He goes to Washington, D.C. So power is accruing from the states, from regional things, and becoming a nationalistic kind of concept. And that's also something that's happened to Congress that happened a little bit later. But then You then had executives, really not consecutively, but two in the same period of time, TR and Woodrow Wilson, who wanted to accrue power to the executive branch within now a newly empowered federal government.
Walter, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah. So two things, since we're kind of in the weeds, I wanted to jump back real quick, Andy. And I think you previously said that in the Constitution, the Constitution provides the Senate the power to declare war, and I'm pretty sure the Constitution provides both houses the ability to declare war, and the Senate obviously has the ability to, confirm appointments made by the president and also confirm treaties. But I didn't know if you had anything else you were thinking about there. And then I want to jump to why are we here? Why was the house capped? I want to hear the story from your perspective. It sounds like you might have a unique one.
Yeah, so it's interesting in the date 1929, which was infamous for a number of reasons. Jeff had already mentioned it, and I love the name, by the way. I really love the name of this of this bill, which I'm citing right here, the Permanent Apportionment Act of 1929. Am I completely off base to say that you gentlemen have heard of this bill at some point? Because
Once or twice.
Oh,
This
you
is
hit a
not
home run there. You
something-
crossed the plate.
this is not something routinely taught in a normal 8th grade civics class.
Yes.
So I thought this was interesting, but there was an organization which is kind of and I guess I'm a little bit surprised that they're kind of completely aligned with you on this. The American Association of Arts and Academy also issued out a report on why they too want to uncap the House. I see noddings because I figured you had done that same kind of research. And they had a number of reasons for it. One of them was after the census of 1820, there was a series of gridlocks. And again, I'm probably telling things you've already heard of, so this is really more for your audience. But there was a series of gridlocks in which for the first time, it happened once before in history, but they managed to get through it. But in this case, they couldn't get through the gridlock of the expansion of the House. And of course, at this point, the proportion had changed, and something also had changed too, to the proportional of voters. So just going back really quick, when the first true election occurred in 1788, it was a small representative group, only landholders, whites, and men. I like to jump fast forward to 1920 because at this point now the suffrage movement has been successful. Obviously, we now have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. So now everybody can vote. So I would argue even the proportional existence of the House per population hadn't, even 435 was probably not proportional to what it was originally when not everybody had the vote. So I like to jump to that 2020 period, and I find that coincidence a little interesting that it was in the 20s that we had those issues. So there's a couple of other pieces too, and this is one that I find a little alarming. There was also pressure to say that they couldn't physically accommodate a larger group and body in there. And I was wondering if you guys wanted to comment on that, which seems one of the silliest arguments I've ever heard. Politics has lots of silly arguments, but that one, and I'm sort of sitting here thinking right now, could we not get to a 691 House because they would need to rebuild the Capitol? I mean, is that the reason for it? I don't know. But in the 1920s, that was another reason that was put up. And then any ability for Harding to do it might have gone with his death. And then you had the staunch conservative Coolidge, who had a lot of other priorities, but that wasn't going to be one of them to push it through, nor was the appetite within Congress strong as it had been in previous times. For example, one proportional piece I just wanted to cite here was after 1876, when you are now accommodating a lot of new voters, particularly that of African-American voters who are now part of the whole process, the House of Representatives then had 293 seats based on apportionment following the 1870 census. So clearly, there had been an appetite all through the Republic that when serious changes had occurred, reapportionment would occur. So now, We are now admitting half, right? About half of the nation. We are now giving them the franchise and no change. And that was attributed a lot of that to the gridlock.
Yeah, I think so part of the issue, I think, was the wealth grew too fast during the Gilded Age. The people that were elected to Congress were not necessarily the best and the brightest, the most virtuous during this time period. The leaders of Congress struggled to get anything passed. And part of this is because you still have the division of the Civil War. You've got the Democrats that are completely obstructionist. They're fighting to try to restore the Confederacy in a way as much as they can. And then you have Republicans that are, while there are some serious-minded individuals there are a lot that had caught the coattails of wealth and rode that into power. And so I think, specifically, reading about Thomas Reed's time as Speaker of the House and how he instituted Reed's rules, and the reason that he instituted Reed's rules to, overcome the disappearing quorum and all that stuff, it was a matter of, there's always been a balance all the way back to the founding between conservatives and progressives, people that have a foundation and are happy with the way that things are, and people who want to build on that foundation. Now, typically, the people that want to build on the foundation want to build really high, really fast, and that creates the problem, right? Because now you've got this massive divide. And we're supposed to find balance in here. And Reed, I think, was struggling at getting things done. And so he consolidated power into the speakership, and they didn't think much of their fellow colleagues, reading about this. And I think that's a big part of it when you're talking about when you get to the stalemate in 1920, the population has risen. You've got an influx of immigration. You've got an influx of wealth maybe going to people that necessarily don't deserve wealth. There's a lot of people that can, ride on the coattails and scam others and make money at this time. And so
I got to jump in.
Go ahead.
Yeah. What also happened in 1920? Prohibition. The creation of, some of the largest black markets for money you've ever seen. And that wasn't repealed until 1933. And I think that there is, maybe it was the booze, maybe it was the black market, or maybe it was a mix. But well, I think there's got to be something there. And the other thing I always love to point out on the why is you do have to go back to the Bill of Rights, the original Bill of Rights. And, a question that I often ask is, why wasn't the amendment that would have guaranteed us this right to representation, why wasn't that passed? Because ultimately, the 1929 quote-unquote Permanent Apportionment Act wouldn't have been allowed had, that first proposed amendment to the Constitution passed. And it didn't. And Jeff and I, we went and looked at the Library of Congress and the archives, looking for clues on this. And there aren't a lot. It appears that, some smaller states maybe were on the committee, their senators and representatives. Madison was also there, though. And doesn't seem to be anything in his papers about it. So you got to kind of scratch your head and say, why was this last minute change made in the committee amendment that made it illogical, impossible, right? It created a mathematical impossibility that then Connecticut also caught. So I think there's some intrigue there that I think somebody needs to write an amazing play about, Jeff.
Well, so
Yeah.
so
a musical, not a play, a musical.
Yeah, sorry.
A musical. Yeah. Well, so putting that aside for a second, we both know Jeff from 30,000.org, and he's done an extensive amount of research on this. I believe he's writing a book. I would love to get published and to read it. He's never told me because it's a long thing, and I think he's still kind of working out the research and stuff. But I think he knows the answer to that, and it is something that I'm very curious to understand is why. And you point out something important there about Madison, because Madison purposely he took notes for a reason. When he was studying about governments, he thought back to the Roman Republic and the Greeks, and he asked himself, man, I really wish I knew what the people who designed this government were thinking about when they designed it. Why did they do the things that do? How did it come about? I'm gonna make sure I take notes so future generations can understand this. Having that mentality, and then remember, his notes were written in shorthand. Okay, only he could read them, and he didn't come back and edit them until much later in his life. And at this point, he is suffering from severe rheumatoid arthritis. He can't even walk upstairs in his house. He's got a bed on the main level, and Dolly is the one back and forth. He is dictating to Dolly his notes, and he'll take turns writing too. But Dolly helps him, transcribe his notes from shorthand to longhand so everybody can read. All of this painstaking work, all of this understanding that he had to preserve the why. Why didn't he preserve this? Like, where is it? And I got to think, like, maybe he did. Maybe somebody else got to it. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a little conspiratorial at this stage, but I am very curious, and I hope somebody writes about it, or we can find it one day.
Well,
And
maybe
on the topic of prohibition, I like to draw a contrast. Prohibition was passed and repealed very quickly, right? It was, what, 10 or 12 years? But the Permanent Reapportionment Act is still in place. The conclusion is Americans love their liquor more than they love their representation. We need to change that.
Well, I think it has more of a direct effect on your day-to-day life than representation does. It takes time for the population to grow and for you to get separated from your representative to feel it. And I also think that was that amendment banning alcohol was a reflection of a society that had grown too fast and wealth had grown too fast. It was an unruly society. They were trying to balance out the people. They did not take the founders' intent of a limited federal government into this, but I think they were just reacting to the environment that they lived in. And it's good that they made that reflection fast too and repealed it very quickly. Go ahead, Walter.
No, I don't have anything to add. Let's keep going. Go to the website y435.org and support. If you'd like to become a sponsor of this show, we do have sponsorships available. If your brand is something that could fit in with the No Cap brand, if you believe in lying, probably not going to be for us. If you believe in representation, we're good to go.
Call me now, call me now, call me now.
I love how you take a moment of dead space and you turn it into a commercial. That was perfect. Andy, you got to appreciate that coming from a marketing background, right?
I do. I like the marketing at all. You got repetition is key too. And also I should just, for those who are watching on the video side too, is that my office is experiencing Utah sun. So I'm kind of doing this thing where I kind of come in and out of the sun on the video side. So fortunately, most will be probably downloading on audio. And just one other point too on all of this. I also think to all of the points that have been made, and even add in the turmoil that in 1920 we're also coming off of our First World War, that there probably wasn't as much appetite for that level of change. And again, looking at some of the notes, there was a feeling among some of the Congress people that 435 was almost too big at the time. And again, population is 127 million. I also think it's not coincidental that was the time of the growth of the chief executive side. Even though both Harding, Coolidge, and later Hoover were relatively hands-off, though Hoover was not as hands-off as people think he was after the crash of 29. But keep in mind, it was just that 12 years between you had the Wilson administration and the Roosevelt administration. It was not Congress who was on the radio reassuring the American people and trying to make them feel better. There was no congressional fireside chat. So what you're also getting is that final piece to all of this is mass media, so that the national politicization and the power of that single voice from the executive now becomes more and more powerful. Before, of course, without radio and then later TV and now even the internet, there was the inability for a president to communicate with all of the people, whereas a representative could have still managed at least part of that. Now, of course, with Roosevelt, he's on the radio reassuring me. I might not even know who my representative is.
Yeah, that is a
This-
point. Go ahead, Walter.
Walter's
I was
wheelhouse.
Yeah, I was like, this is Walter's jam right here.
Yeah. So my wife is has a master's in journalism and currently runs the radio station for all of Wyoming, which is an affiliate of NPR, which was recently had 13% of its budget cut, I think, approximately, in the rescission bill. But it's not. I think I have a lot of problems I could say about NPR. Loved Car Talk. Love a lot of the programming over the years growing up. Love a lot of things about the ideas there, and I love where the future may take us. But I think you're so right that national media basically was given the job of Congress, right? That basically pre-World War I, Congress was doing most of the instructing, of the educating. And this gets us to the definition, I think, of representation. And so I'm an attorney, so I think about this a lot. What does it mean for me to represent my client well? And it is a bidirectional, voluntary educational pathway where often there's remuneration, right? Sometimes not, sometimes so. And, key here is this educational component. My clients are representing, or they are representing to me, they are educating me about their problem. I'm taking my specialized knowledge and I'm going to educate them back. I'm also going to take actions on their behalf and then return to them with the results of those actions, and we're going to iterate, right? And they're going to say, okay, well, here's what I'm thinking now, and we're going to keep charting forward. And it's no coincidence that there are a lot of lawyers in government, in Congress. They have this notion that they want to be good representatives, but it just so happens that today they're unable to represent. And the reason is because they gave away this huge piece of representation, which is the education side, to the media. So bringing it back to the media, it's not their fault. It's not the fault of MSNBC and Fox and NPR that Congress gave them all this power and for them to abuse that, and they're not accountable to the people. They can't be fired. And the FCC coincidentally is licensing all of these broadcast networks, right? So the executive branch has ultimately the authority to kind of be controlling who gets to say what, potentially by potentially revoking these licenses or having some backroom chatter. And so you really see, I think, a need, when we have the House uncapped, to be thinking about how do we restructure the educational pathways in America, and this goes, not just to, the university system, but also think about AI, right? So AI is both a tool. It's also another reason to uncap the House, which I'm not going to get into right now, but it really is potentially, it's going to be necessary, I think, in helping congressmen and women sort through the problems that are presented by their constituents, right? You can imagine, okay, say we do an uncap where we have 200,000 constituents per representative. That's still a lot of people. But today I could use AI to filter through those comments and categorize them really quickly, right? I mean, the job of what used to be 5 interns could be done lickety split, right? And they could educate me as a representative so much more quickly. And then I could turn around and say, well, my goodness, I don't know the entire Code of Federal Register. As a representative, I don't happen to have, in my memory bank, every single piece of legislation that's ever been filed. Well, you know what does? Artificial intelligence, right? Again, and so, I mean, all of a sudden the job of representing, I think, is becoming much easier. But then we run back into this risk of, well, what about what AI products can we trust, right? What AI products can represent us well? And it's a really big question, and it's something that we're going to get to later in the show. We here at the No Cap Fund actually just had an interaction first with an AI bot, and then with a real human. And that story there, I think, is it will tell a lot. I'm going to pass it back to you, Jeff.
Well, let's get back to that media part, okay? Because the idea, and I like to tell people, your congressional representative's responsibility is to listen and to inform, and then to go debate what they have listened and informed about to represent you in the federal Congress, right? And that's how we, all of us, become one, right? Like that's the system. And they are not able to hear us. And they can't even, in a lot of ways, they can't even if they wanted to talk to us, they can't. They have to go through the media now. Because as you mentioned, and I think, I think there's blame on both sides. You say it's not the media's fault. And I don't think it's the people in the media's fault that are living today, but I certainly think there were people back in the day who saw an opportunity to capture power and did so. So I think there's blame for everyone to go around. But, it's like what we were talking about with the executive, right? Big had to be made big. Corporate versus executive or federal government, big and big. It's power meets power. It's John Calhoun's, basic theory of government. And you did that with the media. The media grew with it. And that was the way that the executive was able to communicate with the people. And you didn't have clever or articulate representatives who took advantage of this in their hometowns well enough. Or over time, what you did is you had more clever and more wealthy media executives that siphon that power away. And I think that's probably the most likely thing. And so where we sit today is, there's a lot of people in the media that are complaining about the problem. And at some point, they have to recognize that they are a little bit part of the problem. They have to start giving away their power because ultimately, look, there are people, how many people in the media have left their media jobs to run for office, right? They're running for office now. They want to tell us what to do. How about...
Or getting appointed.
When I ran for Congress, I called my local stations. I emailed. I did a whole bunch of things. And basically, the media said the same thing as briefly and as nicely as they could. We don't care about you. You're small potatoes. We're not going to cover you. And if they decide not to cover you, then unless you want to pay, like, hey, we've got a marketing package. You can pay for this. Well, you do give free coverage to a lot of people. Well, there's rules. We have to balance it. Yeah, but you're not really being honest about that, are you? I mean, especially when you call in. I mean, I could tell stories, but I won't. And so, like, if the media really wants to help, instead of leaving your job at CNN to go run for whatever at whatever position, maybe be a journalist and go find the people out there. There's a lot of them. And we're going to have them on our podcast here and there that are starting new groups that are trying to change the way things are and give them a voice, represent them, listen to them, share what they have to say.
Well, yeah, and support uncapping the House. Sorry to step over you, Andy, but the media right now does have an opportunity, and so for any folks in the media listening, right, this is a story that needs to be covered. There's intrigue. It's interesting, and frankly, everyone that I talk to loves it. And what we need are for those in the media to understand that ultimately, if you want to fix your problem, you got to fix Congress. And if you don't fix Congress, we may not have a country much longer, right? I mean, that's the threat that we're all facing. And one of the reasons we're here is that, the fabric of society, the fabric of our civilization here in the West, of our great Constitution, is under great strain. And I think you're right, Jeff. Everyone does have a role to play and a little bit of blame to spread around. And my point is that let's focus on the solutions, which is uncapping the House, and let's keep moving the ball forward. So, Andy, back to you.
Well, hold on real quick. I'll get to, sorry, Andy, but I just want to respond to that real quick. So this is beneficial if you are in the media. And so Andrew Yang wrote about this in his book, Forward. And he talks about how local media is basically gone. Everything's national media. And Andy mentioned it earlier. Everything's national. Everything's national. I think you have the opportunity now with the technology that we have. And if you uncap the House, you almost force the hand for the media to decentralize, right? And you empower them to be more local. And frankly, there is profit to be made there. Like, there are people that are hungry for it. Elon Musk talks about how X is the new media. And look, I understand why he says that because it's profitable for him, but it doesn't work that way.
And it's not here right now.
But it's not going to work that way. It needs to have some sort of organizing body at a small structural level because he's just doing the same thing everybody else is. He is one big national corporation that's trying to control all the little small entities, and those entities need to have their own semblance of power in their communities, and they don't right now through the system. But if you uncap the House and you empower the media to cover the story and to become more local, there's money to be made there. I promise you. And I think there's a great deal of talent in this country that is going unused because there is not enough positions of power for them to go into. So anyways,
well,
go
and
ahead.
this goes back to your idea of having 3 or 4 houses, right? We talked about let's have one in DC, one in Cincinnati, Ohio, one in Denver, one in San Francisco, and then suddenly the media establishment has to fracture a little bit. But I think I think the No Cap Fund and the Representation Foundation we are organizations that are distributing power to the people. We're giving the people a voice, and we aim to represent you, everyone. And so, if you want to feel represented, go reach out at the website and fill out the form, sign the declaration, and we would love to help you help everyone else and understand whatever you may be going through and see if we can help.
Yeah, go sign the declaration. It looks like on X we got about 17,000 people watching right now. At least 5 of you go sign the declaration. All right, just like I'll announce on the show. I got my email right here. Go sign the declaration. We'll make Walter's night. He is the best salesperson we got. We need a good salesperson for the presidency. So Andy, let's get.
I will get in an ice bath if we get 5,000 people to sign the declaration. I will go do it on this live stream if 5,000 of you do it right now.
I mean, I hope it happens.
Let Andy talk.
I feel no problem. I feel like I've fallen back into my marketing executive days here with all the marketing going on. It's wonderful. I think it's great. It's just interesting because I'm not an official officer of the organization, but I'm appearing on here not just because I get to talk history, which I love to do, but also we talked about the media. When in some ways it should be almost easier for a representative to try to get that media time than it was 20 or 30 years ago with the fragmented media. But then here's the problem. You are competing, and this is the secret of business, you are competing for an audience. And you are now, in the terms of media, competing with all of the other media distractions. And how easy is it to bring in sort of the big gun, like I'm going to have Trump come into my district and campaign for me if I'm in a swing district and so forth. And now, well, that's great. He's going to come and he's going to do that. But now I have to vote exactly as he tells me to, not as I want to or believe to. Yet, if a district were not 780,000, or I think I checked, and I think West Virginia's representatives are more like 860,000, you guys would know the answers much better than I would, but even a higher proportion than the average. There is no way that I'm going to use a fragmented media to get to those people, to do what Walter was talking about earlier, which is representation. 300,000, and again, there's no magic number, but I'll tell you what, less is better in a fragmented market to get my message using podcasts, using physical visits to, the local YMCA or whatever have you. Can I get to 300,000? All of them? I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I can sure get to them a lot more easily than a kid 780,000 and listen to them and represent. The other thing, of course, I'm on here for is the concept of breaking up some of these districts to try to create a better sense of diversity. One of the things that's also happened is you have this incredible sort of lack of true sort of representation. Everything's decided in the primary, and therefore, again, an executive has an overriding thing in those competitive areas. And the reordering isn't even just blue and red states. To me, it's more rural and urban in some cases. I always noticed that a very safe district in Dallas is staffed by arguably now the maybe even passing up AOC as the most prominent Democratic voice, which is Jasmine Crockett. This is Texas. This is a person with deep blue inclinations in Texas. So again, the districts aren't just red state, blue state. That's more applicable to the Senate. It's also rural, urban, as we see in, let's say, Atlanta is the same way. Georgia used to be very red. Now it's purple, almost entirely through the urban thing. To break up those districts, to try to reverse some of the, what I call the super gerrymandering that has occurred, would also be, I think, another thing to consider when you're talking about supporting the No Cap Fund.
And that, take us back for a second, if you would. Talking about 1920s again, the waves of immigration, um, and those people, were coming from Europe and various places. They weren't coming here to travel to the South and work in the hot sun, right? They settled in the population center, so the population shifted, and so in my opinion, that's a big reason why we ended up with the Permanent Reapportionment Act of 1929. They couldn't do it because the ones who were going to lose power were pitching a fit. But I'm interested in how that sort of unpleasant view of immigrants coming into the country kind of echoes today. And then one other issue for you, we may not even have time since we're so close to the end, but something to think about. As a CPA, I think a lot about internal controls, and one of the most important is the tone at the top, right? If we think of the U.S. House as the top and it's not expanding, none of the other deliberative representative bodies throughout the nation are expanding either. North Carolina, where I live, has 120 members of the House. Since 1868, when the current Constitution was adopted, it has never increased, and our population has grown 10 times. So there's 2 points I'd like you to think about and maybe speak to if you can.
Yeah, one of the unsung great changes, amazing things that's ever happened into humanity itself, and especially to our nation and sort of representation, is one simple technology, and that's air conditioning. I genuinely question whether Florida, Arizona, and Texas, three massively growing states and also subject to immigration, would be the things they are without that simple device. Certainly, we wouldn't have seniors living there. So this
Excellent point.
migration from north to south occurs, a lot of it through this technological innovation that we don't think about anymore because fortunately, most of us have it. I didn't, but I grew up in Wisconsin, so it wasn't as vital as a kid. Here's almost a chicken and an egg problem. We can't fix our immigration system because Congress won't fix it and won't act because the other thing, of course, I discussed a solution a moment ago, and now I'm kind of back to the problem. Congress doesn't want to act. They don't want to vote. They don't want to go up in front of their representatives and say, I voted for a 20-year amnesty program. And then, of course, a district would be altered through immigration. So that's another factor. So because they don't fix the immigration program, without that fix in place, we don't know who those voters would be. And thus we can't get to a representation as we did when the franchise was given to African-American, largely non-citizens who were slaves in the 1860s, and to women in the 1920s, and to a lot of those immigrants where there was a path to citizenship. Now Congress won't really decide on one. That's been a 30-year kick the can down the road. I go all the way back to the Clinton administration talking about some sort of immigration bill, and there isn't one because nobody wants to vote on it. And without that, I think it's going to be hard to look at how the immigration, especially in the southern states, would affect that sort of representation. Does that make sense?
I think that I think part of the reason that we came to a cap was because they were using immigrants to increase congressional power in certain areas, urban areas, right? And so those Congress people were then captured by the immigrants that were brought in by the corporations. And I think what you see a lot today, and you mentioned like you have this it's not blue and red state, it's urban and rural, okay? And the urban areas are the areas that bring in a lot of immigrants. They're their sanctuary cities, and it increases their congressional power. Now, I am for good immigration. I think that we should be supportive of bringing people in to our country, but we have to give them rules and a pathway to come into the country. And when both sides they're kind of ignoring this issue because it benefits them in different ways, right? Depending on which side of the aisle you're on. It's something to raise money for as opposed to a problem to solve. And it skews the representation in the House.
But I want to challenge
Eh,
one point
oh,
on that, though, because this idea that the corporations are bringing immigrants into blue cities. I mean, meatpacking
No,
plants
I'm
aren't in blue cities. Farms aren't in blue cities. I mean, there's plenty of immigrants being brought in to non-sanctuary places.
no, I
So
so when I said
let
that, I was talking about the 1800s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
yeah,
would
and
say
it's go ahead.
just what I've heard. This is not verified, but it's been. I think it's been spoken often within the halls of DC's power structures that there's been a tacit agreement that um, the large corporations want the voting bloc and the workers, right? Because they are if you bring people in illegally, they stay somewhat ignorant, often intentionally, and so they're easier to control, and you can pay them cheap wages. Um, so there's a group of people that likes both of those things. It would be my observation.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
But and you're getting back to that one fundamental thing we talked with the media, and that is money. And the amount of time I would love to do, and there's probably a study out there, the amount of time spent on fundraising today versus even 40 years ago. And they do. They love the issue. They can run on it from both sides, love the issue. If they actually voted on it and fixed it, then they might not have the issue anymore, and they'd have to defend. And that's the other thing why I'm supportive of this. I want more representatives because I think you would have then a pocket of people who genuinely would want to get things done and not wait on Mike Johnson to tell them how to vote.
It would also help marginalize the extremist, making it easier for those who want to get stuff done to get stuff done.
Right. You would move, instead of pushing people to the outside, it would pull people to the middle.
So I think we've got maybe 30 minutes. If everyone's going to keep going.
I'm good.
Okay. Jeff, do you wanna debate the name
No,
of the
I
show
got
next?
we
Or
no,
do
I
you
got
want...
one more. I got one more thing for Andy, and then we can do that.
Okay, well, and then are we turning to debate, or are we going to talk about Riverside?
We'll do the Riverside, and then we'll do the name of the show at the end.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. So Andy, in our pre-interview, you mentioned how compromise is a dirty word, and this is something that Kevin Kosar from AEI kind of spoke to last week on our show. So I wanted to get your take on that. Why, number one, why did you say compromise is a dirty word? Do you believe it should be a dirty word? And how do we make it a good thing again? Because here's my perspective. In no situation, in almost no relationship that I can think of, the most common relationship I think of is the one with my wife or my children. I never get to make all the decisions. I always have to compromise. And realistically, I kind of think it's better that way too, because I think if I made all the decisions, my life wouldn't be as good as it is now, right? I think the other opinions that are brought into the different interests that I take into account, that where we compromise and make decisions, ultimately lead to new things. I was just doing a story time with my in my local community here for kids, and I was telling them the story. I was getting ready to read Dr. Seuss, Green Eggs and Ham, and I said, has your mom and dad ever tried to get you to eat a food that you didn't like? And you just said no because you didn't like the way it looks. Well, I used to do that with Brussels sprouts, and now they're my favorite food, right? I made a compromise with my wife to try them one time, right? And that was a good compromise. Compromise is a good thing. It makes us all better. So I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, so we talked about some of the other factors, the media landscape, the reordering. Another aspect of all of this is the weakening of the party system and turning over a lot of the selection process to primary voters. And what we've learned is the rump group of primary voters tends to be able to alter the elections. And because they tend to be the loudest, most extreme members of it, again, when you're trying to get across to 780,000 people, but it's those 100,000 who are going to elect you to the office, they're going to have an outside voice. And if they're participating, donating, Trump going to a mega rally, they're not going to be the ones who want to compromise. They're the ones who have heard basically for the last 20 years that all of their problems was because of that other political party. Now, so I think that's a factor a lot in the fact that, again, why they just want to like let Mike Johnson take the heat, and I'll vote for him, but I'm not going to stand out. Not a lot of Thomas Massey's in Congress, or even I would argue in this sense Rand Paul in the Senate. The other factor that you had mentioned in terms of compromise, it's hard for people to understand today, and I'm probably a little bit older than this group, what it was like coming out of the 1970s into the 1980s. In the 1970s, after Vietnam, after OPEC, after massive inflation, and even after the debacle from Jimmy Carter of trying to rescue the hostages, in which the United States basically at that point seemed feckless and ineffectual. And so obviously then in the 1980s, we get Ronald Reagan, one of my favorite presidents, not shocking given I'm the conservative historian. And yet Reagan himself does not deserve all of the credit for setting up what was essentially a 25-year run of economic prosperity in the United States. The other guy who gets credit was a member of Congress, Tip O'Neill, and a couple of others, Dan Rostenkowski and a couple of other people. It wasn't just Reagan like basically dominating Congress and getting what he wants. He worked with Congress. He respected Congress. Congress wasn't there to do his bidding, nor even his own caucus, which of course at that point he didn't even have a majority of, which I find really interesting. No, Tip O'Neill was an opponent. Tip O'Neill was from the other party. Tip O'Neill was the guy across the aisle who Reagan was going to disagree with more than he was going to agree with. Tip O'Neill was not the enemy. And that's part of another problem today. And it's interesting that Fox News, I have good and bad to say about them, but there's this nice, I really like this segment that's on the Bret Baier show in which he brings on two individuals from opposite sides of the aisles and has them talk about a mutual bill. For one of the examples of this, and I'm going to cite a Senate example, is he had Katie Britt and John Fetterman, who co-sponsored a bill together. Again, compromise is not a dirty word. I tend to, obviously in my politics, lean towards the Republicans. We have enemies in this world. The Democratic Party to me is not the enemy. They are the opponent.
Well put. All right. So I'm going to tell a little story about our space or our live stream from last week. So Roger was having technical difficulties. And when we ended the show, the way that Riverside works is it downloads to your device and then it uploads. And then you kind of have to stay on the line a couple minutes after the recording's over. Let it finish uploading to the cloud. Well, Roger jumped off. It didn't finish uploading. So I wasn't able to download this stuff. And then, during the show, Roger was having trouble. We didn't hear from Roger, and I didn't know why because I had my notifications off. But he kept on trying to talk, but his mic wasn't working. And so the next day, I reached out to Riverside customer support, their chat, and they were basically like, you have to. I had two of Roger's files that weren't downloaded all the way. They were at 80%. They needed to be at 100%. So they were like, here is some instructions. Here's what he needs to do. I sent them to Roger. Roger uploaded, but I still wasn't able to get my recording. Now, at some point, I'm dealing with the chat bot, and the chat bot doesn't understand what I'm saying, and it's basically like, it's sending me in a circle. But eventually, I get through, and I get email assistance. I get to a real person. These people, there's more than one of them that work on this. They work tirelessly to recover our video. Right. It took 2 or 3 days for them to get it. They got it uploaded. There was an issue because what was happening is, I think Roger had something running in the background of his computer that pulled his mic. That's why we weren't able to hear him, and that's why his recording was messed up as well and wasn't like pulling together all the way. So they explain all this to me. They give me different ways to recover it, and they recover our video, which is fantastic. And I just thought, like, this is a great representation of representation, right? Not only did they help solve my problem, but they also educated me along the way so I don't have this problem again, right? They listened to me and they informed me. And, Roger and I had a talk today because, look, I didn't know these things either. I need to be able to express these things to my guest. And it was, there's probably somewhere that they already put them up that I had missed along the way. And I made that mistake. But they were nice. They educated me. They gave me some links to understand it more. We talked it over with Roger. And, at the end of the day, we were represented. Our problem was solved, which is ultimately what Congress is supposed to do. Listen to what our problem is. Tell us what you know of how to solve our problem, then go solve our problem for us.
And part of it happened because a frustrated constituent, a frustrated citizen. We had a different experience with Riverside the week before. I clicked on the link and expected to have the same experience, and I didn't. So I'm trying to troubleshoot. I open on my phone, I open on the computer, and it kind of went sideways because a frustrated citizen can't get what he needs.
Yeah. And that happens. I think we've all been a frustrated citizen or a frustrated customer at some point in time. And
Absolutely.
to that representative, if that representative reflects back your frustration, the problem is probably not going to get solved. If that representative is like, hey, that is frustrating. Can you tell me more about that? Let me understand what you're talking about so I can better assist you. Then you're helped, right? Like that's a good representative there. And ultimately what you get, depending on if you're a citizen and you go and you're actually get in front of your representative or your representative staff, they really don't care what you have to say depending on what letter is next to your name or what donation number is next to the check. Like those are really the things they're focused on. They're not really focused on the things they're supposed to be focused on.
So I want to clarify for our listeners. Riverside is riverside.fm. It is a video streaming software platform. They provide a great service. You can go check them out using whatever search browser you use, or just go directly to riverside.fm, or I believe riverside.com. And Riverside, if you want to sponsor us, we would be very interested in having you sponsor this podcast. We'd be happy to do a proper commercial. But what I want to say is that what Riverside did was their customer service representatives were great, right? Riverside has good customer service representatives. Their AI customer service representatives, not so good. So maybe that's something you can work on, guys. But the humans that you have are amazing. So props to you all for doing that. And I'll just say I googled Riverside FM. Actually, I searched in the Brave search browser or search engine, and there's Reddit threads both saying Riverside is the worst and it's the best. And what we're saying is here's a real world example where they've done a good job on one piece and not so great on another piece. There's room for improvement, but the humans appear to be great. So everyone go check them out if you have video streaming needs.
And their actual service, as you can see tonight, is very good. You're having a good time here.
And what I'll say is I've dealt with a lot of AI chatbots, and while their AI chatbot didn't help me as much as I needed, it's still better than others AI chatbots. So it's still got me, because here's the thing. Sometimes if you're talking to an AI chatbot, you can never get past the AI chatbot. This chatbot at least escalated me to a person because it recognized it couldn't solve my problem. And there are a lot of chatbots out there, Squarebase, that do not recognize that. All right. So we're coming to the end of our show. What is the name of our show? We haven't really decided. Walter has an idea. I have an idea. So Andy, we're going to pitch you our idea, and we want to hear what you have to say about it. And Walter, I'm gonna let you go first since you're president.
All right. So we are starting. We have this 501c4, the No Cap Fund. We are starting a 501c3 called the Representation Foundation.
Time.
Sorry?
That's all you had. We agreed. You only had 5 seconds. You lost. All right, my turn. I'm kidding. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
You're gonna laugh. I actually did in my marketing days. This is that I did this study. You do have about 4 seconds. You look at an email, so an email comes in. you have less than 4 seconds to get the subject to click through. And then once you click through onto the email, you have 4 seconds there. 4 seconds for a banner, 4 seconds for radio to draw you in. Not 4 seconds for the total message, but 4 seconds to get the process started, to do that sort of barbed.
I was just barbing Walter.
Yep.
The representation station, the website where you can find everything to get better representation from your professionals all the way to your elected representatives. So the representation station is a website. It's a landing place for conversation, for better representation. And it's also a podcast where we discuss what's on the website, where we create content that then gets, recanoodled back with other content to create, kind of lasting pieces of educational content that we can push out. And we're recruiting people who are passing through the station to join our movement, to go sign the Declaration of Representation. And Jeff, my good friend, has a different idea for the name of this podcast, which he wants to call the Sphere of Power, which I think is...
Whoa, you're taking away my pitch. Come on.
He's doing your pitch.
Oh, this is precisely part of an argument. And it's clicky, right? I understand the marketing angle. It's like dun dun dun, the Sphere of Power.
Welcome to the Sphere of Power. Today on the show, Thomas Massey.
Yes, and I think that's a great segment of what we're doing. I think that there should be segments in the show called the Sphere of Power where we talk about this. Which you're going to get into, kind of this conglomerating, this centralization of power, putting power into a sphere, and how what we want to do is make it more fractal, right? We want to make it more representative. And, I just think it's a great sidebar that you can be found at the representation station. I imagine that its host will be Jeff Mayhew.
All right, is it my turn to say my own pitch now?
5 seconds.
Extend the sphere and you take in a greater variety of parties and interest. You make it less probable that a majority of the whole will... Oh man, I lost my place. That's too far away. I've got old eyes.
I won.
Will form a common motive to invade the rights of other citizens. Look, representation is power. Okay. And most people don't understand what representation is. If our job is to get them to understand it, we first have to get them to listen to us. And in the last 4 years, talking with people in my community at coffee shops and breweries and hotel lobbies, the one thing I can tell you is people feel powerless. Okay. They want power. They want agency. They want to be able to govern themselves. They're tired of what we're living in. And the sphere of power speaks to that. It educates to that. It brings people in and then shares that power with them through representation by giving them the definition, by teaching them about it, and by helping them go out, find their representative, and to ask for more power. Plus, it's just a cooler name. I can come up with better graphics. It's just awesome. The representation station can be a website. The Sphere of Power is the place where people come to speak and debate, to get represented. All right, Andy. Roger.
So,
comments.
my old marketing hat, and part of this was competitive products. There was always 3 different questions that needed to be answered fairly quickly. What is it? Why should the audience care about it? And how is it different from something else? I frankly like what you had said there, that the name of it should be Representation is Power. And then underneath that banner, you could put in all of those things. You could put in your chat and discussion, all that. The problem was, I'm just being critical. Your sphere of power. If I see that, I don't know what that is. It could be something, the latest McGovern in a Marvel movie. Do you know what I mean?
It could be. I was watching. I saw the new Superman recently, and I was looking at the Daily Planet logo in there, and I'm like, yeah, you could wrap sphere of power around that. You could create that into different ways. It's a place for people to talk. Roger.
A sphere of representation.
I just
Representation is power.
I just
Multitude.
want representation has to be in there somewhere so
I
that
agree.
people immediately have that as I put it, that connection point.
But most people don't know what representation is.
But a sphere could be anything. That's my only thing. Just being, just putting my marketing hat on.
Are you making Walter very happy?
I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying,
No,
again,
take a side. Pick a side. Get on one side of the aisle.
exactly. You only have a couple of seconds as people breeze through media, and that's your moment of connection. That's why, I picked something kind of obvious, conservative historian. Well, it is what it is, kind of. It's like the movie Snakes on a Plane. What's the movie about? Well, it's about snakes on a plane. You know what you're going to get.
No. Roger, what do you think?
I think we should meld the two and call it sphere of representation. So you're trying to draw people in to increase their representation, expand the sphere. I mean, I understand that representation is power, but it's hard to make that link in 4 seconds for your average American.
So here's what I want to know. I want to do. There's 20,000 people listening right now, according to our live stream numbers. What do you think? Do you think it should be sphere of power? Do you think it should be representation station? Leave a comment, send us a message.
Or a mashup. Yeah. Some mashup of it.
We're gonna keep debating this, and then we're gonna name it. And it'll be fun content, if nothing else.
I like representation X. Something like that, just so that as long as they and I totally understand your point of that, but if somebody's seeing representation, at least they have one point of entry.
And on that note, I have just become the proud owner of representationstation.org and representationstation.com.
You were supposed to buy that yesterday.
And I forgot yesterday, and being the good representative that I am, I remembered now. And those are now off the market. So if you were thinking about stealing those from us, not going to happen, I don't think. It says it's processing, so we'll see. I guess if somebody wants to try to beat me to the punchline, if you want to contribute to the show, please go check out www.y435.org and sign up. Leave us a comment, find the DMs, and become a continuing contributor. One of the best ways you can support this show is by agreeing to donate on a monthly basis. And frankly, that gives you more voice. If you donate on a monthly basis, we are more likely to respond to your comments and questions. We believe that you have a vested interest in what's going on here, and we would love to have you become a sustaining member. So please do go check out the website and let us know what you think. Should we not call this show the Representation Station? I'm a reasonable person. If 5,000 people tell me not to do it, I definitely will not.
Where are the 5,000 that are telling you to jump in the ice bucket? That's what I want to know. I want to get the 5,000. I want to see that. Look, I'm gonna go out here and I'm gonna extend that offer. He said that he would do it tonight if 5,000 people signed up tonight. But I think Walter should do it regardless when we get to the number 5,000.
I will.
We should record it. It should be part of the live stream. Whatever it happens, I think it'll be great. All right, so. We're coming to the end of our show. I want to go over. We've got some upcoming guests coming up, and Joey, our intern's been just hustling really hard on social media, trying to connect us with people. And next week we have Ben Connolly, who is the author of the Substack Carrying the Fire. He's going to be our guest on July 28th. So Ben's going to be a great guest. And then the week after that, on August 4th, we're going to have Camille McKenzie. She's the founder of New Patriot Foundation. They're one of the, new groups that are forming out there. We had Thomas Howes on from Reagan Caucus earlier this year. So this is another group like that that's trying to fill that conservative void, kind of like what Andy is doing as well. August 11th, I forgot to mention this. Hey, Roger, I want you to be our guest on August 11th. We're going to interview you. All right. So it's going to be, we're going to do one by one. We're going to do each one of us where we're going to be the guest so our audience can get to know us. Okay. Hopefully that's not a problem with you. I put you in and I forgot to tell you. I apologize.
As long as we get a couple of minutes to talk about guitars, I'm in.
You can.
Just a compliment.
You're gonna. The whole episode is you. We want to know.
Right.
I'm sure that you can relate guitars to representation somehow, and I can't wait
Yep.
to hear it.
Yep.
All right. August 18th, we're having Matthew Beat, also known as Mr. Beat, the YouTuber from the channels Mr. Beat and The Beat Goes On. He will be on the show. You got to go to his website and check out his music. It's really great. He's got songs written about almost every president. It's fantastic. Just really great content. He's an ex-history teacher, I believe. On August 25th, that's going to be Walter is going to be our guest on the show on August 25th. We're going to learn more about Walter, and we're going to forgive him for being a lawyer, but we're going to learn all about why he got into this.
I'm also a wagon driver. So right now, everyone, I'm at Cheyenne Frontier Days driving a team of horses in a parade and grand entries with the rodeo. So it is. I'm not just a lawyer. Don't let that cloud.
And I expect a ride. I expect a ride in his wagon on Friday when I go up there.
All right.
All right. On September 1st, we have Chris, and I apologize, Chris, because I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Ron? I don't know. I apologize. I'm going to need to learn that before the show. And Jacob, also don't know how to pronounce your last name because I only read things and I'm really bad with phonetics. They are from the New Rhino Coalition. So I've jumped in. I've jumped into their spaces a few times. They have great, lively debates on those things. They're really interesting, so we're excited to have them on. On September 8th, it's either going to be me or somebody else. It's open right now. And then on September 15th, we're going to welcome back to the stream for the first time, Sarah Wolk. She is with 5-star voting. We had her on the space when we started doing guests a few weeks or a month or two ago. It was a great time, but now that we're joining the stream and it will be election time, people will be voting coming up soon. So great to have her back on the show. All right.
It's all payback because Mr. Beat and Sarah and Walter were on stage together 2 months ago in Kansas, and so now they're feeding each other's hoppers.
That's right. So Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. Do you have any final words for the listeners? And where can people find you and follow you?
Yes, so I'm the conservative historian. I'm on all of the major directories, Apple, Spotify, all of those, and now start to look for the Chronicle of American History as I focus a little bit more on our nation's history. And once again, thank you very much for having me. And please, for this audience, please support the No Cap Fund in any way that you can.
Absolutely. You can go to y435.org. You can sign our declaration. You can sign up to volunteer, and you can even make a donation. And if you donate, I promise we will do great things with your money. We will uncap the house. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Peace, love, and representation.
Ciao.